trade, preparing you for any outcome, setting yourself, body, mind, and spirit, ensuring a balanced approach to trading, trusting education, strategy, trade skills, and intuition. Imagine your trade successfully materializing, obeying your trading strategy, avoiding decisions based on greed or fear, and never looking back or stopping once your trade has commenced. All right. So let's get down to it. If everybody can hear me okay, drop me one in the chat and we will get this thing underway. All right. So let's hop over to trading economics. Let's get caught up on where things are. And what we'll do today is we didn't have a ritual on Saturday. We'll go through and we'll just get caught up overall as we got some bigger announcements with rate statements this week and some key data. So that is the plan. So trading economics. All right. Cool. So Eurozone economic sentiment weaker than expected. Economic sentiment indicator in the euro area fell to 93.6 in April, down from a revised 95 in March and below market expectation 94. This marked the lowest reading since December, reflecting broad-based decline in confidence across the sector. Consumer sentiment dropped sharply, alongside declines among service providers. On the price front, consumer inflation expectations surged. All right, so expecting inflation to rise again, highest since November 2022, while manufacturers' selling price expectation edged down, easing from March. Cool. So that's there, right? So just a negative sentiment across the board out of the Eurozone. We have oil. WTI crude futures fell more than 1%, around $61 per barrel on Tuesday, marking the second consecutive session of losses amid lack of clarity on U.S.-China trade talks and prospects, and prospects of oversupply. On Monday, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that it's up to China to de-escalate the trade tensions with the U.S. Amid confusion about whether formal negotiations are currently, whoops, sorry about that. Formal negotiations are currently underway. Um, the ongoing trade dispute between the world's two largest oil consuming nations has led analysts to significantly lower their forecasts of oil demand and prices, with Barclays cutting its 2025 Brent crude price forecast by $4 to $70 a barrel. Additionally, some OPEC Plus members are expected to suggest an acceleration of output hikes during their meeting on May 5th. That'll be interesting. Potentially extending production increases for a second straight month. Investors are also watching U.S.-Iran nuclear negotiations, which could lead to more supply if an agreement is reached and sanctions are eased. Now, that'll be an interesting scenario if that happens, because right now tensions are pretty high. Um, and doesn't sound like they're close on any agreement in the U.S.-Iran conversation. So looking at oil potentially continue to move to the downside. So we'll see where that goes. The Canadian dollar was at 138 per US dollar, trading near its highest in 6 months as the G10 currencies continue to be supported by a flight away from US dollar assets. Uh, while markets assess the outlook of domestic economic policy under the newly elected Liberal Party government. Canadian Liberal Party won the fourth consecutive election by a relatively narrow margin, placing slight pressure on the loonie following expectations of a majority win, but still marking former BOC and BOE Governor Mark Carney prime minister as a minority government. The incumbent has so far refrained from prioritizing a trade deal with the U.S., underscoring Canada's leverage and opting to secure deals with other nations. All right, so everybody continues to move away from the U.S. dollar, even in conversation. In the meantime, the BOC noted the uncertain trade policy for the U.S. Uh, risks a Canadian recession should the U.S. proceed with its aggressive tariff package, while signaling a broad economic stagnation should the trade war de-escalate. All right, so we're looking at either a recession or potentially stagflation. So that's where we are coming out of Canada. All right. Um, mm, mm, mm. Stock market for the Eurozone. Stocks are mixed on Tuesday as investors assess the wave of earnings for signs of how U.S. global uncertainty are affecting the company. The Stocks 50 was down 0.2%, while the Stocks 600 rose 0.2% through the auto sector, although the other auto sector slipped by 0.4, led by Volvo Cars, which reported a sharp drop in Q1 profit and suspended its full year guidance. That's big. Um, Suspending the full year guidance. So that's there. Uh, excuse me. The Swedish automaker also announced 18 billion in cost cuts. Porsche fell 7.4% after cutting its sales and margin forecast, citing U.S. tariffs. In banking, HSBC beat Q1 estimates despite a year-on-year decline in profit and revenue. Deutsche Bank gained 3.1% on stronger than expected profit. Meanwhile, Lufthansa slid 1.6% as it warned of rising risk of weaker transatlantic travel demand. Adidas reported 155% jump in Q1 and said it would raise U.S. prices in response to tariffs. BP missed profit expectations amid falling oil prices and ongoing strategic shifts. All right, so you got a mix, but you got a lot of companies down, so outside of the banking sector, um, and then you got Adidas saying that they're just going to increase prices. All right, so that's overall in the Eurozone. Coming over to the calendar, we have today, we got Joe's job openings, CPI for the Canadian dollar, for the Aussie dollar, which would be interesting to see, as the RBA is looking at these numbers to give more insight on kind of where they'll go with their rate statement this month. Um, they are expected to cut another 25 basis points. So we'll watch and see what the CPI data looks like this evening. We got China manufacturing tonight, tomorrow. Preliminary CPI for Germany. We have ADP non-farm employment change, GDP for Canada, advanced GDP for the United States, employment cost index for the dollar. Then you got core PCE, right? That'll be a big number for the United States there. And then tomorrow night, we have the rate statement for the Bank of Japan. Okay. Bank of Japan is expected to hold the rate again, but it's going to be about forward guidance. All right. What does it forward guidance look like? And do they continue to give insight on their path, as we've been talking about, just for the in that third quarter time frame? What does their path look like? What are they looking to do from a rates perspective come August, September, October time frame? Okay. Uh, so just watching to see what's going to come of that there. Okay. Um, if they give some very direct guidance, we could see that yen move. If they play the fence, we could potentially see the yen weaken, or if it's a softer tone, we could see that when yen weaken a little bit. But I don't know that they're going to soften the tone. So we'll watch and see. But don't be surprised if we get more yen strength after that press conference. Um, then we got unemployment claims for the dollar, ISM manufacturing, final manufacturing PMI. For the dollar, retail sales for the Aussie. And then on Friday, we got a regular run of the mill beginning of the month data. First Friday, right? Average hourly earnings, non-farm payroll, unemployment rate, and got some preliminary elections out of Australia. All right. So that's an overview of where we are from a fundamental perspective. Um, yeah. Benny, good morning, bro.
Good morning, Ryan. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, man. Yourself?
Oh man, doing pretty good. Always glad to be here with the team.
Yes, sir. Got anything top of mind fundamentally, bro?
No, not talking about just big, this week, earnings season. So that's just looking for some things to, see if we can get the market to move, man. It's been moving, good move to the upside, but we'll see what happens once these earnings hit. So
Yes,
that's what I'm
sir.
focused on to see what the numbers look like. See if there's any drastic changes.
Yes, yes, yes. It definitely should be interesting, man. I'm curious to see that too. Let's see if it pushes pushes Donald Trump's hand in any way.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah, in
Yep.
agreement there.
Yeah, and there's a little they're working on these tax breaks. Uh, but there are a couple people in his camp, you know, saying, "Hey, man, you actually might need to raise taxes." You know,
Really
yeah, yeah, you actually, if you're really about the people, you need to possibly raise taxes on the rich. So we'll see as we continue to uh, watch how it all plays out. Regarding these tax breaks. Because I know it's big on the priority list. We'll see if they can get it worked out while he's got the majority. But because you're looking at in the future, 2 years you got midterms. 2 years from now, you could completely be stripped of power. Depending on the moves that you make, his approval rating is already in the tank. After the first 100 days. So uh, it's gonna be interesting moving forward to uh to see what happens with these tax breaks.
interesting. You think those detractors will be removed at any point?
I don't know. That's what I'm interested in seeing. Who has his ear, you know, um, to help him make those. Who's he going to listen to make those final decisions? I think I still think it's in the bag, but I just found it quite interesting that you have some people, that are his supporters that are like, you know, you may have to do the opposite considering
Yeah,
to keep things afloat because it's not. I mean, it's not good. you're staring at a recession right now.
Hmm.
You're staring at a recession. So is that the route you want to go? You want to go down that path? We'll see. I mean, it's not like he is. It's not like when the first George Bush ran for president and he said no new taxes, and then he raised taxes and it cost him a second term. This guy doesn't. Um, he doesn't have another term. Well, technically, he doesn't have another term to worry about. So
Technically.
yeah, Reed said he think the majority is too thin. It's gonna be quite interesting. Reese, he does have a thin majority, but they seem to buckle and do whatever he says to do. So we'll see what happens. It's thin, but yet it's still a majority, and they haven't pushed back on them yet. When it comes down to crunch down, they have yet to push back on them. So we'll see. They get too thin, and they want to cut Medicaid. Yeah, I know, but I don't know. They tend to they tend to fall in line. So that's why I said it's going to be interesting going forward. I share those same thoughts, Reese. You would think that, but we'll see.
We shall see. Um, yeah, yeah, we shall see. I'm leaning towards them doing it as well. Uh, just because of how things have gone so far. Um, and I don't know that anybody buckles. So we'll see. We'll see where things go on the fundamental front. Um, anything else from the team? Any other thoughts or things fundamentally to bring to the table? No. All right, cool beans. To the dollar, we're trying to move out of this zone, right? We're trying to get a bit of a recovery here. Been a bit consolidative, but right, we push out that 118, 127 zone. This is on the four. Um, just stalled for quite some time, gave a little bit of a pullback. Now let's see if we can get another rise here, get us in this deep retracement zone, and get to a high price. We do have the stochastic still down in that buy zone. So potential some opportunity for that reversal to continue. Right. Bounce back to the daily for a second. We do have this 80-20 here as well. And looking for price to come back into this 50% 618 range, potentially, maybe even not that far, maybe just back to that 382 and test this previous support level here. And then I think we see more downward movement out of the dollar. I'm not confident that we see a major reversal in the dollar here, right? I think we get more downward pressure before we get another move. Uh, I think we see more downward pressure. I'll just leave it there. We got a nice break of the trend line, and this is our pullback, right? So again, looking for a high price here on the dollar. Um, and so back to the four, right? There's that trend line break, boom. We're getting a pullback here. Run that sub fib off the low, and you see where we sit right around that 382 mark. See if we get a pushback to the upside. Like I said, to get us at 382 level, potential a little bit higher. Um, Watching this area here around 101, 116, and then see if that level holds for another move back down to the bottom. Okay, so my thoughts on the DXY. So that's where we sit. Um, I'm gonna take a look at oil and the indices real quick, and then I'm gonna hop into the Aussies and take a look there. um, Oil, right? Moving back down. We didn't get a high price here, right? But we got back to around the 50% retracement level, and we're starting to slide again. The stochastic getting back into that buy zone. So I'm curious to see kind of how things evolve. I don't think that evolution will be with talks in China though. Um, Seeing what OPEC Plus does to see if they add more supply to the market. Um, but so I'm curious on if this $55 level will be able to hold, right? Do we come back and get a double bottom and push higher, or do we break that and continue to the downside and getting us down back to $43 a barrel? Um, we come back and take a look here. We have previous consolidation at this level, right? Consolidated here, resistance here, okay, support here. So that $55 level is a pretty strong one on the monthly stochastic trying to push out of the buy zone. So we'll see, right, from a longer term perspective where things go. Um, Coming back down here. That's where we are on the weekly, right? We got to that 382. That D extension isn't too far at $46. Okay. So we break this $55 level, right? $46 is in sight. So that's what I'm watching on oil to see if we're able to hold this level or if we break that to continue lower. Okay. Um, so bring this back to current day, right? 46, that D extension here on the daily is at 43. Okay. So if those levels get broken, boom, right? 46, between 46 and 43, that range there. And then we'll see where things go. Okay. If we trade lower than that, I'm definitely going to sit and wait on low prices, right? This is the larger fib on the daily. Um, Not sure why this fib is still active because we got to that D extension. Um, yeah, that's interesting. Um, but if we break this level, I'm gonna sit and wait on low prices. Um, and see what if we get to 33. I don't think we get to zero again, but I'm gonna watch for low prices on oil to then get back long. So um that's the daily down to the 4. All right, similar deal. $50 range. So 50, 46, 43. As you look at those TP targets from a fib perspective, coming down from that weekly weekly time frame. Again, I'd love to see us get up into this range before reverse, but we could not, and that may happen. Okay, so we'll watch and see what happens. Again, this is where I'm watching. Break and retest to continue to the downside or double bottom to push higher before we then get back short. Coming down to the one. Similar deal, right? Beautiful push out of the 118, 127 zone. We haven't got to that 382 yet, right? So we'll see if we get there on the 1 hour. So watching that there as that continues to evolve, that 80-20 on the one. Okay, but beautiful move so far out of the zone. Now we're pulling back some. Okay, so that's oil. Any questions on oil?
Nope.
All right. 1 second. All right, so that's oil. Let's go over to NASDAQ. Okay. From weekly time frame perspective, we stayed just inside that AV boundary and we pushed higher. I am watching this range here around that A boundary, right? 20,337 to 20,814. Watching that range there to see if those levels hold as our stochastic pushes back into that sell zone. Okay, come down to the daily, and you see we're pushing to the upside here. I was running this sub fib just to see what the matching extension is there, which puts us just outside of that 2814 area. Um, I don't know that we're done with the moves to the downside. I don't know that this is the bottom yet. Um, just with everything that's happening so far. Um, I know we got tax cuts in the works, but do we get? Yeah, I got you, Reese. But do we get another move down before those get implemented, and then see the crazy run to the upside? So that's why I'm watching the zone here, right? If we break above the zone, then um, that'll be a break of the cloud and right break of that resistance zone. So that'll be my indicator on whether we continue riding to the upside or not. Yes, in the short term, we're long, but what happens here? So as we get here, right, we'll start to be a bit more cautious with the long plays until we get a decision, either swing high and then move back down, or right, a break and a retest. So watching that there on the NASDAQ, right, and that'll set us up for a crown pattern if this zone holds. So watching that part closely. Coming down to the 4, right? If we push into the zone, we take out the A, which is where these sub fibs come into play, right? So we got a 618 retracement there. The matching extension is here, 20,900. Okay. Just outside of that 2814, the top of that range that I'm looking at. Okay. So um watching to see how it moves there. Okay. Um yeah, yeah. So we'll see. We'll see how things go. Right. And here on the one, similar deal, 20,900, right at the top of that range. Okay. So we're moving north right now. Continue to play that. But as we get to those D extension areas, we'll watch and see. We'll watch and see how things play out. Do you think 80/21st? Potentially, Reese. Right? It's been a strong move to the upside. So looking at a pullback and a continuation there. You definitely could get it. You ran that off the C, right? You definitely could get that retracement. First, come back and retest this previous resistance here, right? And come back into the zone. Definitely not out of bounds. Definitely not out of bounds, right? You got your cloud starting to move sideways there. So Reese is looking for a pullback here. And then that continuation long. I can see that. I can see that, right? You have your stochastic that's getting exhausted here, but um, still more down pressure on the 1 hour. I can see that happen. I could see that happen, right? With the earnings, we could definitely see some movement here as those start to come out. So good eye on that 30-minute though, 80/20, right? So let's watch that team for that retracement there. Boom. And then a move back long. Okay. Questions on the NASDAQ? Nope. All right. Reset oil 30-minute. What you looking at here on the 30, bro? Got that move there. Enter 80-20 there. Yep, 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 yep. So Reese is watching this fib here, right? Slowly trying to slide down into that 118, 127 zone, right? So looking for another push down and then a retracement. So let's watch that. Good eye, bro. Appreciate it. So that's where we are, right? So 80-20 on the 30-minute here also, right? So let's watch that for that reversal, potential high price, and then let's see if we get a continuation to the downside at some point. All right, so that's on the 30. Questions on oil? Nope. All right. S&P 500. Similar story as that NASDAQ, right? 80-20 there on the 30-minute. Okay, so keep your eyes on those lower time frames for some of those short-term moves, if those are your charts to trade. Coming back here to the daily, similar story as far as watching some of these higher areas here. Right, watching this zone here on a retest of the cloud in line with this resistance. All right, cloud is still bearish, but we got some consolidation happening, right? So watching to see what happens as we push into the area, we got a stochastic in the sell zone. Okay. But do we get another push to the upside and then a reversal? Okay. So that's what I'm looking to see if we get there. Okay. Come down to the 4. We just wicked the 382 here on that push to the upside. So the matching D extension 5706. Okay. Don't think. Yeah, we didn't have anything there. So these are your fibs coming to the upside. There's your larger fib there, 618 retracement, 58.99 just above that zone, right? For your matching extension. And that'll get your stochastic on the 4 back into that sell zone. Okay. Hold on one second. Everybody. My bad, everybody. Um, there's our capital fib there, 618 retracement, right? Matching extension there. 5,899. So looking for a push there. We could potentially get to that D extension there on the 4. Um, outside of that range, and then we'll see what happens. But ultimately, I'm looking for another leg to the downside on the S&P 500 as well. But again, that all depends on what Donald Trump decides to do and and the narrative that he tries to continue to carry. Okay, we are above the cloud, right? So we are pressing long there, and so we'll see if we get a shift of that at any point. Down on the one, all right, similar story. 618 retracement. Looking at the matching D extension here, 58.71. Okay, but again, watching that 57.899 resistance level to see if we're able to hold there for a reversal. Okay, so just watching those as they continue to push to the upside, right? Got some long positions in, but we'll watch as we get here to see what happens um, in those long positions. Questions on the S&P 500? Nope. All right, cool deal. Before we get to that, the Aussies, that pound NZD 80-20 is starting to play out. We got this reversal to finally kick in, right? Broke the cloud, pulling back a little bit, but we're bullish on the cloud ahead, right? We do have a stochastic in the sell zone here, so we'll look for a pullback and then continuations to the upside, okay? So that 80-20 on the 4 hour is starting to work its way out. So we come down here to the one, and this fib I'm going to run to the upside just to track the ABCD wave, right? We got an 80-20 here. So we'll look to see if we can get a nice pullback back into the zone. Nice retracement, retest the cloud, right? And then continue our move to the upside in the 80-20 on the 4. Okay. So starting to get the action that we wanted to get. Now we're just playing the ABCD waves to the upside to get us to that 382 on this 4 hour, right? And again, we have the potential of a crown pattern here as we get to some of these higher ranges. So we'll watch and see how that evolves as well as we continue in this retracement back to that 382 level. Okay. Yeah, so that's where we are, right? 382, 50%, 618. In that range, we'll see if price stalls out. But right now, the 80-20 is playing out beautifully to the upside, and we'll continue to ride that to that 382 level. So just a quick look on that pound NZD that we've been watching for a couple weeks. All right. Questions on this one? No?
No, sir.
All right, cool beans. Aussie CAD. All right, we talked about the Aussie dollar a little bit. Right, Australian dollar dipped to 64 on Tuesday, pulling back from multi-month highs as global trade uncertainties dampen investor sentiment. China reiterated that it is not participating in trade negotiations with the United States. All right, that's key. Donald Trump is saying that they are. China said no, we are not. So counter claims by Donald Trump that he had spoken to President Xi Jinping. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent added that it is up to China to ease tensions, noting China's trade surplus with the United States domestically. All right, so attention turns to the inflation data coming out on Wednesday, which could influence the Reserve Bank of Australia's policy outlook. Right, the RBA is widely expected to implement another 25 basis point rate cut in May. As it navigates growing global economic risks, including potential fallout from the U.S. tariffs. Okay. China being the major trade partner, it all makes sense, right? So with that, we got that inflation data coming out. This is where we're sitting right now on the daily. So Stochastic in the sell zone, 618 retracement, previous support. Could it serve as future resistance? All right, this is the area that we marked out that we're watching to see how price responds here, but potentially looking at shorts coming here, right, on the Aussie. Okay, so looking for that next move to the downside. Okay, so right into the zone. Now we're looking for potentially some additional confirmation on lower time frames. Data, we'll see how that CPI data comes out if it kind of supports that narrative of a 25 basis point cut, right? So we come down to the 4, getting that consolidation in the zone, right? 786 retracement here. We didn't quite get to that 86 level, but we're consolidating. Okay, moving sideways. So right in that zone. So we got some alignment on the 4 hour and on the daily. Deep retracement. Do we get a C to D move and push lower here on the Aussie? Okay. So watching that closely there. Um, use your additional confirmation, right? Be it trend line break, be it cloud break, right? We got stochastic and the cells on there on the 4 also. Okay. We got some nice alignment there on the daily and on the 4. So as we come down to the 1, we're shy of that 118, 127 zone, but we haven't gotten to this 382 yet. Okay. So we're hovering here, waiting for that additional confirmation. Okay. Haven't broken the cloud yet. So we'll see if we're able to get a nice cloud break here on the 4, I mean on the 1, right? Boom. And then are we able to see that move start to happen back down to the bottom of that data coming tomorrow? Okay, so watching this one closely here for reversal um, from a higher time frame. Fibs, looking for that additional confirmation on the lower time frame. Okay, that's the Aussie CAD. Any questions here? No? All right, cool deal. Aussie Swiss. I really didn't expect. Um, I didn't expect this one to break this low, but it did. Right, this is an all-time low from a monthly time frame. So guys getting down into the buy zone, but we might close below this all-time low at 53.43 on the month. Right, we're just a couple days left. Then we come down to the weekly. That was a strong bearish close on the weekly, right? So maybe we get more retracement here. Maybe it doesn't close like that on the monthly, but retracement, and then do we continue lower? That all depends on, overall sentiment, tariffs, uncertainty, everything that we have in the market. But that break below that level was key in my mind, right? So we got, and this is a 618 retracement. We didn't get to that 786 level, right? So the matching extension here is at 38,161. Okay. With the break of that level, that was key. Strong bearish break on the weekly. So I'm looking at retest, maybe a little push higher, but I'm looking for a continuation down here, right? With continued uncertainty across the globe. Okay. Um, so that's on the weekly. Coming back to the daily here, right? There's your retest again. Strong bearish break, pullback retest. Okay. So maybe we get a pullback to around 54,661. Um, I don't know that we get deeper than that, but I'm looking for another leg to the downside. Getting us into the 40,000, 30,000 range on this Aussie Swiss. Right. So as the sentiment continues to dampen, um, that's what we may get. Right. We got stochastic here in the sell zone as well. Um, so looking at potential continuations to the downside here off the daily. Okay. Coming down to the 4. Here we are. Here's your 80-20, right? We're moving back to the upside. Do we get to this 382, maybe 50% range, right? And then again, looking short, right? So we'll see how this data comes out tomorrow. Um, Maybe we get another boost, but we could just stall here at this previous all-time low support, right? And then start making that move back down. So we'll watch that, and obviously the developments from a global trade perspective as well. But that was a strong break of that level, a very, very strong break of that level. So I'm looking for a continuation to the downside on this Aussie Swiss. Okay. Don't have much happening here on the one to the downside. So just tracking that retracement going long. Yeah. Yep. All that got taken out. So tracking this off the higher time frame, but looking for continuation to the downside. Questions on the Aussie Swiss?
Nope.
What are your thoughts on this one, bro?
I think it. I
Any?
mean, it's a good move out of the zone. I think that it'll run and then it'll eventually turn over. I'm not quite sold yet that we're out of the woods and is we're ready to continue to move to the upside. I could be wrong. You know,
Agreement.
the VIXI is not as high as it was. But it's still still elevated, right?
Mhm.
Um, and we've got earnings coming up. So I mean, we've seen for the last little bit a positive rally, right? But I mean, look at where we've been. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
yeah,
like
yeah.
look at where we've been. So I'm still looking at this as a correction. And continue to climb. It's been a great move out of the 80-20 zone for sure. But you've got that daily resistance level,
Hmm.
to the upside just underneath that 61.8. So we'll see what happens when we get there. Like I'm not for as far as we've moved to the downside, I'm not sure that I haven't seen enough change fundamentally yet to say that hey, we're out of the woods yet. You know. Like I say, you'll always be wrong. But I think it'll push to a high price and it'll turn over. I mean, what positive have we really seen from Australia?
No, none.
Correct. So we know that, we've had a bit of a risk on price action, but it's modest. So I'm not quite, I mean, look at the last move, right? Where we climbed and then we collapsed. So right now we're still in a downtrend. The short term retracement is what I'm thinking, and then it'll turn over. But
Yeah,
we'll see. We'll see what happens.
yeah, yeah. Same thoughts. Same thoughts. I agree with you. I agree 200%. So we'll see. We'll see. I don't think we're out of the woods yet either. I don't think we're out of the woods yet either, especially if they're expecting another rate cut as well. So cool. That's the Aussie Swiss, Aussie Yen. In my mind, a similar story here. Nice retracement here. Maybe we get another push up around the 618 retracement zone. Um, but I'm looking at similar story here. More continuation to the downside coming. Stochastic in the sell zone there, right? 382 on the retracement, right? Do we push back into this zone here to retest some of this consolidation here before we move down? But ultimately, I'm looking for another move down in this Aussie yen as well. Okay. So that's on the daily. Come down to the 4, right? And there's your fib on the 4. Just tap that 618 level. Okay. Do we get another leg higher to retest that trend line in that previous daily support zone? Right. But ultimately, looking for downward action. Okay. Right. Maybe we get another push to the upside to get that stochastic back into that sell zone. But overall, I'm looking short here on this Aussie yen. Okay. Looking short on the Aussie yen. We'll see what the rate statement has to say, right, in their press conference at some point tomorrow night. But I think we'll get that pressure to the downside. Okay. Then coming down to the one. That's where we sit. Okay. So trickling to the upside, maybe another push, but ultimately looking short on the Aussie yen, tracking this one off the daily and off the 4. All right. The 4 hours giving the best look right now. Right. Trend line coming down. Retest that trend line, continuation to the downside. Questions on the Aussie yen? Nope. Okay. Aussie dollar. Sitting at high prices here, right? We understand where the dollar is, the boundary. Okay. Um, if we get a retracement on the dollar, right, we'll see this push back down, and this could ultimately give us an inverted crown pattern, right? If we get this push down back into the zone, this could be the only one that kind of moves in the opposite direction. And this will be more led by the dollar than the Aussie. But, right, looking for a retracement to come here on this Aussie dollar back down to the downside. Again, right, if we're able to get dollar strength to come from somewhere. Okay, so we'll watch and see if we get that development with earnings and some of those potential catalysts. To the 4, we got 80-20. Still in that zone, right? Here we go. Still in that zone, still sitting there hovering. Okay, we'll shift our trend line to the outermost point. Like so. And we'll just watch. All right, we'll just watch. Cloud also starting to move sideways, right? So we got our consolidation happening. We just need a catalyst. Okay. That data tomorrow could be the catalyst to give that break, right? And start that move back down to the downside on this 80-20. Okay. So that's what I'm watching, this Aussie dollar push down, and then we'll see what happens as we get back to these previous support levels. Okay. That's on the 4. Down on your 1, you just got consolidation here. Okay. Just bouncing back and forth right now. So tracking this one off of the 4-hour and that 80-20 there. Questions on the Aussie dollar? Nope.
Nope.
Questions on anything that we covered this morning? Didn't get through as many charts as I wanted to, but oops. Nope, no questions. Benny, any final thoughts before we wrap it up, bro?
No, sir. No, sir. Just it has been a
Patiently
great
waiting, bro.
man. It has just been a. I mean, you pick your spots, but it's just been a. I mean, and it's pretty much the sentiment throughout the markets when I listen to different people's podcasts and stuff like that. It's just a drag right now. You really have to be careful and pick your spots. It is what it is. You know, we can't force it to change.
Yep.
Can't force it to change. We've got an administration that's created a mess, and so you you have to wait for things to clear up. People still trying to wrap their heads around because we got to know, right? Everything is lagging. So
Hmm.
while when you looked at like the last jobs numbers and things like that, and when you look at the latest inflation data, was it 2.4, 2.3 or whatever, people say, oh, well, everything is within was is within range, right? Yeah, there's still some work to do on inflation, but look where it's at. But you got to keep in mind those last numbers are lagging. We still haven't seen the impact of the tariffs. That comes later, right? because it's
Hmm.
because all the data is lagging. So you have to just watch the selling points that people try to make. If you're watching the shows and stuff on TV and listening to different people speak, like, yeah, you can spew those numbers, but that's from lagging data. That's data without the impact of the tariffs, right? And,
Yeah.
and so that's where there's a lot of hesitancy in the market. Like for example, like because of the tariffs and because of that 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 supply chain disruption that's caused by a lot of that stuff, you gotta remember, like you still have people that they don't get inventory day by day. Like they had inventory left from before the tariffs, and so when you have these type of disruptions with supply chains and this and that, and costs going up, you still haven't seen, the hit from that. You just haven't. And so we'll see how it goes. Like some of the stories that I've listened to. Hey, I've got uh 60 days of inventory left. You know,
Yeah.
I've got 60 days. So think about that. Like that inventory hasn't run out for those folks, and they've got to re-up under the new tariff conditions. So how is that going to impact things? What shortages do that cause? Or maybe, people can't, get as much inventory as they typically would with the same amount of money, right? The cost goes up. So now you have less supply, but if the demand is still there for whatever that product is, it's supply and demand, right? Less supply, high demand, cost goes up. So then therefore your inflation can go up. So, you know, people are still that's why people are kind of still sitting on the sideline, sitting on their hands. It's like, man, like what is this going to look like? That's why everybody, looking at earnings today, to kick off, the earnings season. Like, what are the impacts of what he's done so far in his first 100 days? What is it going to look like moving forward? What did Jamie Dimon say? Something like, what did he say? A recession is uh, pretty much that's where it's headed. I guess that makes sense. Like something like
Imminent.
whatever
Yeah.
whatever he said. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and like when you got money, you just talk about it like, recession. It is what like, oh, it doesn't mean a recession. It doesn't have the same impact on you as it does regular everyday people, man. Like
Right.
how disconnected can you be?
Yep.
Like how disconnected can you be? Because they just talk about it like it's like, oh, it's sunny outside. Like, oh, it's recession. Like what? Like that's people's lives. Jobs could be lost. You know what I mean? So it's just a bunch of mess, but that's what has everybody hesitant. That's why you don't see the markets flowing, like we've been used to flowing. It's like I said before, it's almost like you're in a long summer session or like the holidays or something near. Like, and it's just kind of just stagnant and not moving, like it typically would during this time. But that's it, man.
Yes, sir. I'm with you 100%, bro.
Yeah, it's no fun. I ain't gonna lie. I'm a pretty transparent dude. Not fun at all. Like, it's not. And so, yeah, that's all, man.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, Joy. Prices definitely going up. We'll continue to monitor good people.
Yep.
Continue to be patient. Like Benny said, pick your spots. And we'll continue to monitor the developments, right? Don't want to give our money back to the market, so we'll be patient, wait and see what happens. And then, right, as things iron out, we get clarity whenever we do, right? We'll make our money on the back half. All right. So we'll be back at it tomorrow morning, 6:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for this pre-New York session. You guys have a phenomenal